In 1938, the world was drowning in coffee, literally. Brazil had produced so much coffee that they had a 3-year surplus just sitting in warehouses with nowhere to go. The Brazilian government approached a small Swiss company called Nestlé and asked them one question: can you turn this mountain of coffee beans into something that never goes bad? That question led to the invention of Nescafé, a product that now sells over 5,500 cups every single second. Every second. That is 200 million cups per day, 73 billion cups per year. And the process that turns raw coffee cherries into the instant coffee granules inside that jar, that is what we are going to see today. But here is what most people do not know. Instant coffee was not actually invented in 1938. The first version was created almost 50 years earlier, in 1890, by a New Zealander named David Strang. He used something called a dry hot air process. Then in 1901, a Japanese chemist working in Chicago named Sartori Kato figured out how to make the powder stable enough to last on shelves. But none of those early versions tasted good enough to sell at scale. It took the desperation of Brazilian bankers and the innovation of Nestlé scientists to turn instant coffee into what we know today. Instant coffee begins its life exactly where regular coffee does, on a farm somewhere between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. This strip of land circling the Earth is called the Coffee Belt, and inside it, 2 countries dominate the game. Brazil, 63 million bags of coffee per year. That is 35% of the entire world's supply. Just one state, Minas Gerais, produces more coffee than most countries combined. Vietnam, 30.8 million bags per year, 17% of global production. And here is what is interesting. Vietnam barely grew coffee 40 years ago. After the Vietnam War ended, the government pushed coffee farming as an economic recovery strategy. Now, they are number 2 in the world, and most of those beans end up in instant coffee. Nestlé sources its premium beans from these regions, working with over 100,000 small farmers. The coffee plant itself starts with one of the most beautiful but short-lived sights in agriculture. A delicate white flower, jasmine-like, fragrant, blooms across the branches. It lasts just 2 to 3 days before wilting. Then over the next 6 to 9 months, a small green berry forms at the base of each flower. That berry slowly ripens, turning from green to yellow to a deep cherry red. When about 95% of those cherries on a plant are red, with just a few greenish ones still holding on, it is time. On small farms in places like Colombia and Ethiopia, harvesting is still done by hand. A skilled picker can collect about 100 to 200 pounds of cherries in a day. It is slow, expensive, and incredibly precise. Fingers only pick the ripe ones. But on the massive commercial farms that supply instant coffee production, that approach is simply not fast enough. Instead, they use a specialized harvesting machine that looks like something between a tractor and a tunnel. Here is how it works. The machine drives directly over a row of coffee plants. Inside, 2 rotating cylinders are lined with 1/500 vibrating rods. Each rod vibrates up to 1,000 times per minute. As the machine passes over the plant, these rods gently shake the branches. Only the ripe cherries, loose and heavy, fall off. The unripe ones hold on tighter and stay on the plant. The cherries drop onto collection plates underneath, and from there, slat conveyor belts move them into large hoppers. In about 5 hours, one of these machines can fill up to 60 bags of cherries. By hand, that same amount would take multiple workers several days. But the clock is ticking. From the moment a coffee cherry leaves the tree, a chemical countdown begins. Enzymes inside the cherry start breaking down sugars. If the cherries are not processed within 8 to 12 hours, fermentation can start too early, and the flavor will be ruined before the process even begins. The cherries arrive at what is called the wet mill. The first stop is a large hopper that feeds them into a gravity separator. This is essentially a tank of water, and the physics here is surprisingly simple. Ripe coffee cherries are heavy. They are full of sugar and moisture. Unripe cherries are lighter, more air, less density. So when the cherries hit the water, the ripe ones sink to the bottom. The unripe ones float to the top, where they are skimmed off and either discarded or sold to lower-grade coffee processors. The good cherries, the ones at the bottom, are pulled out and sent over rotating drums lined with a rough, abrasive surface. These drums press the cherries against fixed plates, breaking the outer skin and squeezing out the pulp. What comes out the other side is not yet a coffee bean as you would recognize it. It is a pale, slippery seed still wrapped in a sticky layer called mucilage. The skins do not go to waste. They are collected and spread across the farm as compost, returning nitrogen and organic matter to the soil that grew them. Now the beans enter fermentation tanks, large vessels often lined with ceramic tiles. Clean mountain water is added, and then nature takes over. Over the next 12 to 24 hours, naturally occurring enzymes and microbes in the water begin breaking down that sticky mucilage layer molecule by molecule. This is one of the most delicate steps in the entire process. Ferment too little, and the mucilage stays stuck to the bean. The final coffee will taste dirty and earthy. Ferment too long, and the bean itself starts to absorb off flavors, sour, vinegar-like notes that no amount of roasting can cover up. Farmers constantly monitor the tanks, pulling beans out to feel the surface by hand. When the mucilage has softened enough, when it feels loose and slippery rather than sticky, the tank is drained. Then comes the washing. Fresh water is poured back in, submerging the beans completely. Workers use long wooden paddles to stir the beans vigorously, scrubbing the loosened mucilage off the surface. The water turns murky and brown, a sign that the process is working. This step is often repeated 2 or 3 times, draining the dirty water and refilling with clean water until the beans are spotless and the parchment layer underneath is clean and pale. The beans, still wrapped in that parchment shell, are spread out across large drying beds. Sometimes these are concrete patios under open sun. Other times they are raised beds with mesh bottoms, allowing air to circulate underneath. Workers use large wooden rakes to turn the beans several times a day. Every bean needs to dry at the same rate. If some dry faster than others, you get an uneven roast later. The goal is an exact moisture content, 11%. Depending on the weather, this takes about 7 to 14 days. Too much rain, and the process stretches longer. Too much direct sun without turning, and the outer beans dry too fast while the inner ones stay damp. Once the beans hit that 11% moisture target, they enter the hulling machine. This is where the dried parchment layer is mechanically stripped away, and for the first time, the true coffee bean is revealed. It is not brown. It is a pale, vibrant green, almost like a split pea. This is what the industry calls green coffee, and at this stage, the bean has virtually no smell of coffee at all. That aroma has not been created yet. The green beans are packed into 60-kilogram jute or sisal bags, each labeled with its origin, grade, and harvest date for full traceability. These bags are stored in ventilated warehouses protected from moisture and pests, waiting for their journey to the factory. The bags arrive at the Nestle factory, and from the moment they enter, machines take over. A robotic arm equipped with a spider-like gripper lifts each 60-kilogram bag off the truck and places it onto an extendable conveyor belt. This is not just about speed. These bags are heavy, and eliminating manual lifting prevents the back injuries that used to be common in coffee factories. As the bags travel along the conveyor, they pass over a moisture sensor. This machine checks the humidity level inside each bag. If a bag does not hit the exact specification, it is automatically rejected and separated from the line. Only the bags that pass continue forward. Next, a robotic probe descends randomly into passing bags, extracting a sample of beans. These samples go straight to the quality lab. Then the accepted bags are automatically stacked onto pallets by another set of robotic arms. Each pallet passes over a scale to confirm consistent weight before being moved to the roasting area. But before roasting, there is one more step. The bags are opened and the green beans are dumped into a sifting machine. This machine has vibrating floors that shake the beans aggressively. The shaking knocks off any remaining debris, bits of parchment, small stones, dirt. At the same time, any beans that are undersized, broken, or malformed fall through the sifter's screens and are discarded. Here is something that surprises most people. Before a single bean in a batch gets roasted, it must pass through human taste buds. Professional coffee tasters, called cuppers, sample up to 100 brewed cups of coffee per day. They do not drink all of it. They slurp a spoonful, hold it in their mouth, analyze the flavor, and then spit it out. A palate cleanser between each sample, and then the next cup. These experts can detect flavor variations that machines simply cannot measure. A slightly under-fermented bean, a hint of over-roasting, a trace of soil mineral from a specific farm. Their tasting notes determine whether an entire batch of beans gets approved for roasting or gets rejected and sent back. In the world of instant coffee, one bad bean really can ruin an entire cup. When you are making coffee at a scale of billions of cups, this human checkpoint is the last line of defense before the beans are transformed. Now the beans that pass the taste test move into the roasting drums. These are massive double-walled rotating cylinders, heated to temperatures between 370 and 540 degrees Fahrenheit. That is roughly 190 to 280 degrees Celsius. Inside the drum, paddles keep the beans in constant motion. Every bean needs to be exposed to the same heat for the same amount of time. If a bean sits still against the hot metal wall for even a few seconds too long, it scorches, and that burnt taste will carry through to the final cup. Roasting time depends entirely on the flavor profile that the factory wants to achieve. Lighter roasts spend about 8 to 10 minutes in the drum. Darker roasts can go up to 20 minutes. And here is a fact that surprises a lot of people. Lighter roasts actually have more caffeine than darker roasts. The longer a bean roasts, the more caffeine burns off. So that dark, bold espresso roast, it has less kick than the light breakfast blend. The flavor is stronger, but the caffeine is weaker. When the beans hit their target roast, they are poured into a large cooling tray. A powerful fan underneath blows air up through the beans while sifting arms swirl them around. They stay here for about 5 to 10 minutes, cooling down rapidly to stop any residual heat from continuing the roast. This locks in the flavor at exactly the right moment. The cooled roasted beans are fed into an industrial coffee mill that grinds them into a coarse powder. Not the fine grind you would use at home, but something coarser, optimized for the brewing method that comes next. That powder is brewed in massive industrial units using steam and pressure. What comes out is not a drinkable cup of coffee. It is a thick, intensely concentrated liquid coffee extract, almost like a coffee syrup. This extract is the starting point for both types of instant coffee, but from here, the path splits in two. The first path is spray drying, and this is how Nescafé Classic is made. The liquid extract is pumped into the top of an enormous spray dryer. Inside, the extract passes through a high-pressure nozzle that atomizes it, turning it into a fine mist of microscopic coffee droplets. At the exact same moment, air heated to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about 540 degrees Celsius, is blasted into the chamber at speeds reaching 400 miles per hour. The moisture in those droplets evaporates almost instantly. In fractions of a second, what was a liquid droplet becomes a tiny solid particle of pure coffee. These particles settle at the bottom of the chamber, forming a fine brown powder. That powder is instant coffee. Just add hot water, and it dissolves back into a drinkable cup. Spray drying is fast, efficient, and produces that classic instant coffee texture that most of the world grew up with. But it has one limitation. The extreme heat does affect some of the more delicate flavor compounds in the coffee. For a premium product, there is a better way. The second path is freeze drying, used for Nescafé Gold and other premium instant coffees. This process was developed to preserve more of the coffee's original flavor and aroma, and the science behind it is completely different from spray drying. The liquid coffee extract is first heated and condensed further until it becomes a thick, toffee-like concentrate. This concentrate is then transported by conveyor belt into a freezing hall that stretches 30 meters long, nearly 100 feet. Inside this hall, the temperature drops to minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit. That is minus 50 degrees Celsius. The concentrate freezes solid as it moves through. By the time it reaches the end of the hall, it has become a single long sheet of coffee ice, dark brown, brittle, and incredibly cold. This frozen sheet enters a machine lined with rotating blades that break it into small granules. These granules, still frozen solid, are spread across large trays that look like oversized baking sheets. The trays are loaded into a low-pressure vacuum tube. And now the crucial step happens. Inside this tube, under low pressure, the frozen granules are gently heated to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, about 60 degrees Celsius, for 5 hours. Under these precise conditions, something remarkable occurs. The frozen moisture inside the granules does not melt into liquid water first. It transforms directly from ice into vapor, a process called sublimation. The water skips the liquid phase entirely. An internal vacuum system continuously removes this vapor. What is left behind are perfectly dry coffee granules, solid, crystalline, and packed with flavor. Because the coffee was never exposed to boiling temperatures, the delicate aromatic compounds that give coffee its subtle notes, the floral, fruity, chocolatey undertones, are preserved. The difference between a spray-dried and freeze-dried coffee is visible to the naked eye. Spray-dried is a fine, uniform powder. Freeze-dried looks like small, irregular crystals, almost like tiny pieces of gravel. Drop both into hot water, and the freeze-dried dissolves just as fast, but the taste is noticeably richer. Whichever drying method was used, the coffee granules now arrive at the packaging line. They are held in large storage silos that feed into filling stations. Glass jars race along a conveyor track, and each jar is filled in less than a single second. Some Nestlé factories can fill up to 320 jars per minute. That is over 19,000 jars per hour, nearly 250,000 jars every single day, from a single factory. As soon as a jar is filled, the next station seals it airtight. This is critical. Instant coffee is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture from the air. An unsealed jar would turn into a solid brick within days. The airtight seal locks in freshness, ensuring that every scoop tastes exactly like it did the moment it left the factory. After sealing, a cap is applied, a label is wrapped around the glass, and the finished jar continues to a boxing and palletizing station. From there, trucks carry these jars to distribution centers, then to supermarket shelves, and finally, into your kitchen. The entire journey, from a coffee cherry on a farm in Brazil or Vietnam to a jar of instant coffee on a store shelf near you, can span months. But every single step, the harvesting, the fermentation, the roasting, the drying, plays a crucial role in making sure that when you open that jar and scoop out a spoonful, what you taste is not a compromise. It is 130 years of innovation, from David Strang's first experiment in 1890 to the precisely engineered freeze-drying halls of today, all dissolving into a single cup. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed seeing how instant coffee goes from farm to jar, make sure to like and subscribe to Food MFG Lab. Drop a comment below. What food or drink should we go inside the factory for next? We will see you in the next one.